What's going on, everybody? This is Ferris Biscuit here, and welcome to the final regular season United Hearthstone League Weekly Recap. The dust has finally settled. We know who's going to be in the playoffs. We know who's out of the playoffs. We have a lot to get to this week, so let's go ahead and jump right into it.
This week's matches would see Spiver at 3-3 of the 1600 Dust podcast taking on Ziggy Sarah, also of 1600 Dust, also at 3-3. From there, we have Ridiculous Hack, currently at 5-1 of the Coin Casino podcast, taking on Rod Johnston, who sits at 3-3 of the Tier 5 podcast. And then we also have Versika, who is currently 0-6 of the Hero Power podcast, taking on Ben Reddington, who is at 3-3 of the Dad Legend community. And our final match, we had Andrew Brown of the Happy Hearthstone podcast at 4-2, taking on Chris Plummer of the 1600 Dust podcast, at 3-3. Our first match of the week saw Andrew bring his Paladin, Priest, and Warlock classes, taking on Chris, who brought his Paladin, Priest, and Warlock classes as well. In Game 1, Andrew would jump out to an early lead, taking the game with his Paladin over Chris's Warlock. From there, Andrew would take Game 2 as well, taking the win with his Warlock over Chris's Priest. And finally, in Game 3, we saw Andrew take the victory and the match 3-0 with his Priest over Chris's Paladin. Our second match of the week saw Ridiculous Hat bringing the Rogue, Shaman, and Warlock classes going up against Rod Johnston, who opted to bring Warlock, Priest, and Paladin. In Game 1, Rod would jump out to an early lead, taking Game 1 with his Priest over Hat's Shaman. From there, he would also win Game 2 in the Warlock Mirror matchup and taking a 2-0 lead. Hat would respond, however, taking Game 3 with his Warlock over Rod's Paladin. However, it would not be enough, as in Game 4, Rod was able to close out the match with his Paladin against Hat's Shaman. For Match 3 of the week, we saw Versika bringing his Shaman, Priest, and Paladin classes going up against Ben Reddington, who opted to bring Mage, Priest, and Paladin. Jumping out of the gate with an early 1-0 lead, we saw Ben take Game 1 with his Paladin over Versika's Priest. From there, he would keep the momentum going, taking Game 2 with his Mage over Versika's Shaman, and finally in Game 3 in the Priest Mirror, we saw Ben come away with a 3-0 victory and take the match. Our final match of the week saw Spivey, who would be bringing his Warlock, Paladin, and Priest classes, going up against Ziggy Sarah, who would be bringing her Hunter, Druid, and Warlock classes. Game 1 would go to Spivey as he jumps out to an early 1-0 lead, taking the game with his Priest over Ziggy's Warlock. From there, he would continue his momentum, taking Game 2 with his Warlock over Ziggy's Hunter. And finally, he was just too much for Ziggy in the end, as he was able to take Game 3 with his Paladin over Ziggy's Warlock. Taking a look at the class representation for this week, it was clear that Paladin, Priest, and Warlock were the dominant classes brought this week. Seeing how the players were able to bring whichever classes they opted to go with, these would be the three favorite in the meta right now, so it is no surprise that these were the most picked for this week. Taking a look at how the classes fared this week, as we already mentioned, we saw Paladin, Priest, and Warlock get the most play, and this week Paladin was able to eke out the best win percentage, going 4-2 with a 67% win percentage overall, while other classes such as Druid, Rogue, and Warrior saw no play. It will be interesting to see how the draft turns out for the playoffs as we continue on again into the week of the playoffs. Diving into how the classes fared overall throughout the season, we do see Rogue finishing at 14-1 with a 93% win percentage. We did go back and calculate all the wins and losses for all the classes to ensure accuracy, and from there we see that Paladin and Priest actually tied for second with a 62% win percentage overall, while unfortunately for Warrior, they did come up last with only a 34% win percentage, but they weren't the only class to finish under 50%, as Druid, Hunter, and Shaman, and actually as a surprise, Warlock as well, all finished under 50% on the season. From there we move into the final regular season standings. Sitting atop the standings, we have Andrew, who finished at 5-2, with Ridiculous Hack coming in at second, also finishing 5-2, but 2 games behind in the win column. From there, we had Rod Johnston finishing at 4-3 with 16 games won, and Spivey taking that 4 seed, also at 4-3 with 15 games won. These will be the 4 players who will be representing the playoffs for Season 1, and it'll be awesome to see how it turns out next week. Now it's time to take a look at the players who came up just short of making the playoffs. Finishing in 5th, we had Ben Reddington at 4-3 with 15 wins overall. From there, we had Chris, who finished at 3-4 with 14 wins overall. Coming in 7th, we had Ziggy, who finished at 3-4 as well with 13 wins overall. And finally, we had Versika bringing up the pack in 8th place at 0-7 with 6 wins overall. Taking a look ahead to next week and the week of playoffs, we have Andrew at the number 1 seed at 5-2, taking on Spiver, who is currently the 4th seed and 4-3. And then we also have Ridiculous Hat, who is the 2 seed at 5-2, taking on Rod Johnson in a rematch of Week 7, who is at 4-3.
As you can clearly tell, we do have 4 competitors who are going to be battling it out for the first ever United Hearthstone League Championship. It's going to be awesome to see how this turns out in the coming week, so please stick around. And now it is time to announce the winner of the weekly pick'em. So it is none other this week than Stray Dog. Congratulations to you. I have reached out in regards to getting you your packs, so if you could just let me know what kind of packs you would like, I can gladly get them over to you. That's all I have for this week, but please stick around and follow us on social media, as we will be looking to set a date to have these drafts for the playoffs. Again, we're going to be doing drafting for the semifinals first, and then as soon as we know who is in the finals, we're going to look to do the draft. We might look to do it live right before the final match, but we're still working out some logistics on our end. So that's all I have for you this week. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.